Your mind won't stop racing. The same worries circle endlessly. What you said today, what faces you tomorrow, mistakes you can't undo. Tonight, we're taking a different path to peace. For centuries, Zen masters have used stories to calm the restless mind, not through effort or technique, but through wisdom that gently shifts how we see our troubles. You'll hear 10 ancient tales. A servant who found fearlessness facing death, a bowl made perfect by its cracks, a monk who discovered the sound of silence. Each story addresses a specific source of stress: regret, anger, the need for control, the burden of seeking. These aren't lessons to memorize. They're keys that quietly unlock the doors stress has closed in your mind. Lie down. Get comfortable. Let these stories work on you as you drift toward sleep. The first tale begins now. Story 1. The Cracked Pot. In a small village in ancient China, there lived a water-bearer who served the local monastery. Every morning, he walked down a long path to the river, filled 2 large clay pots with water, and carried them back up the hill on a wooden pole across his shoulders. One of the pots was perfect. Smooth, without flaw, it held every drop of water from the river to the monastery. The other pot had a crack running down its side. By the time the water-bearer reached the top of the hill, this pot was only half full. This went on for 2 years. Every single day, the water-bearer delivered 1.5 pots of water to the monastery. The perfect pot was proud of its accomplishment. It did exactly what it was made to do, never losing a single drop. But the cracked pot was ashamed. Day after day, it could only deliver half of what it was supposed to carry. It felt like a failure, watching the water leak out along the path, unable to fulfill its purpose no matter how hard it tried. One day, the cracked pot finally spoke to the water-bearer. "I am ashamed of myself. I want to apologize to you." The water-bearer looked at the pot with curiosity. "Why? What are you ashamed of?" "For 2 years, I have been able to deliver only half my load of water. Because of this crack in my side, water leaks out all the way back to the monastery. You do all this work, and I waste half of what you carry. I am a failure." The water-bearer smiled gently. He said nothing, but the next morning as they walked down to the river, he said to the cracked pot, "Today I want you to notice the flowers along the path." As they walked back up the hill, the cracked pot looked down. On its side of the path, beautiful wildflowers bloomed in abundance. There were bright yellow sunflowers, delicate blue forget-me-nots, and vibrant red poppies swaying in the morning breeze. The colors were stunning. But when the cracked pot looked to the other side of the path, where the perfect pot hung, there were no flowers. Just dry, barren soil. The water-bearer stopped and knelt down beside the cracked pot. "Did you notice?" he asked. "Flowers only grow on your side of the path. I have always known about your flaw. So I planted flower seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walk back from the river, you water them." He continued, "For 2 years, I have been able to pick these beautiful flowers to decorate the monastery altar. Without you being exactly the way you are, the monastery would not have this beauty to grace its halls." The cracked pot was silent. It had spent 2 years feeling worthless, believing its imperfection made it a failure. It had never noticed the trail of beauty it left behind every single day. The water-bearer stood up and adjusted the pole on his shoulders. "You see," he said, "we all have our cracks and flaws, but it's these cracks that make our lives together so interesting and rewarding. We need to accept people as they are and look for the good in them." From that day forward, the cracked pot no longer felt shame. When water leaked from its side, it knew it was creating something beautiful. Its flaw was not a weakness, it was a gift that only it could give. The lesson in this story speaks directly to the stress we carry about not being good enough. We lie awake at night replaying our mistakes, comparing ourselves to others who seem perfect, feeling inadequate because we can't measure up. But perfection is not the goal. The perfect pot did its job, yes, but it created nothing unique. It left no beauty behind. Only the cracked pot, with its imperfection, brought something into the world that would not exist otherwise. Your flaws are not failures. They are part of what makes you capable of creating beauty that no one else can create. The things you see as weaknesses may be watering flowers you haven't noticed yet. Stop carrying the weight of needing to be perfect. That weight is heavier than any water pot. When you accept yourself as you are, cracks and all, you can finally rest. Story 2. The moon cannot be stolen. In the mountains of Japan, there lived a Zen monk named Ryokan. He was known throughout the region not for wealth or power, but for his simplicity and joy. Ryokan owned almost nothing. He lived in a small hut at the edge of the forest, with barely enough room for a sleeping mat and a few possessions. His hut had no lock on the door. There was nothing valuable inside to steal. Ryokan spent his days writing poetry, meditating, and playing with the village children. He was content with his life. One night, Ryokan returned to his hut after visiting a nearby village. The moon was full and bright, casting silver light across the mountain path. As he approached his small dwelling, he noticed the door was open. A thief had broken in. Ryokan stood quietly at the entrance and waited. Inside, he could hear the thief rummaging through his few belongings, searching for anything of value. The man opened the small wooden box where Ryokan kept his writing brush. Nothing. He checked the shelf. Empty, except for a few books. He looked under the sleeping mat. Nothing there either. The thief grew frustrated. He had climbed all the way up this mountain, risked getting caught, and there was absolutely nothing worth taking in this miserable hut. Finally, the thief turned toward the door to leave, and there stood Ryokan, watching him calmly. The thief froze. He had been caught. His hand moved instinctively toward the knife at his belt, but Ryokan made no move to stop him or call for help. Instead, the monk simply looked at him with kind eyes. "You have come a long way to visit me," Ryokan said softly, "and you should not leave empty-handed." The thief stared at him, confused. Ryokan removed the simple robe he was wearing and held it out to the thief. "Please, take this. It is all I have to offer you." The thief stood motionless, uncertain what to do. This was not how robberies were supposed to go. He had expected anger, fear, perhaps a fight. But this monk was offering him a gift. Hesitantly, the thief reached out and took the robe from Ryokan's hands. Without a word, he turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Ryokan standing naked in the doorway of his hut. Ryokan watched the thief run down the mountain path until he vanished into the darkness. Then he sat down on the wooden step of his hut and gazed up at the sky. The moon hung perfectly round and luminous above the mountains, flooding the world with gentle light. Ryokan sat there for a long time, looking at it. Finally, he spoke quietly to himself. "Poor fellow. I wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." He sat there the rest of the night, wrapped in the moonlight instead of his robe, completely at peace. The lesson here cuts to the heart of a stress we all carry. The fear of losing what we have. We worry about our possessions, our status, our relationships. We spend energy protecting things that can be taken from us at any moment. Ryokan understood something profound. Material things can always be stolen or lost. The robe could be taken, but the moon, the beauty of the world, the peace in his heart? No thief could touch those. When the thief took his robe, Ryokan lost nothing that mattered. He still had eyes to see the moon. He still had a heart capable of compassion. He still had the freedom to sit in peace under the night sky. The thief thought he had nothing to steal from Ryokan, but he was wrong. What Ryokan truly possessed could not be carried away in hands or hidden in pockets. This is what keeps us awake at night. We fear loss. We imagine what would happen if we lost our job, our home, our savings, our reputation. We build walls and locks to protect what we have, and then we worry whether those walls are strong enough. But Ryokan had no walls, no locks, and when loss came to his door, he met it with an open hand. He discovered that loss could not touch what was real. The next morning, Ryokan found his robe folded neatly on the step of his hut. The thief had returned it during the night. What you truly have cannot be stolen. What can be stolen, you never truly had. When you understand this, The fear of loss releases its grip on your chest, and you can finally breathe. Story 3. The Heavy Bell. In ancient Korea, there was a king who wanted to commission the greatest temple bell ever created. He summoned the most skilled bell maker in the land, a master craftsman named Kim, who had created beautiful bells for temples across the kingdom. The king's order was ambitious. He wanted a bell so large and so perfect that its sound would carry across mountains and valleys, calling people to prayer from miles away. The bell had to be flawless, with a tone so pure it would move listeners to tears. Kim accepted the commission. He gathered his materials, built his molds, and began the difficult work of casting the bell. He calculated every measurement precisely. He controlled the temperature of the furnace with exactness. He supervised every detail of the process. The day came to pour the molten bronze. Kim stood over the furnace, directing his workers with sharp commands. The metal flowed into the mold exactly as he had planned. Everything was proceeding according to his design. But when the bell cooled and they removed the mold, Kim's heart sank. The bell had cracked during cooling. Months of work were ruined. Kim refused to accept defeat. He would try again, but this time with even more control. He adjusted his calculations, modified the mold, and changed the ratio of metals. He watched the furnace temperature constantly, making tiny adjustments. He allowed no detail to escape his supervision. Again, the molten bronze was poured. Again, Kim directed every moment of the process, and again, when the mold was removed, the bell was flawed. This time, the tone was wrong. It produced a dull, flat sound instead of the clear ring the king demanded. Kim was exhausted. He had failed twice. The king was growing impatient. The craftsman could not sleep. He lay awake each night, going over every calculation in his mind, trying to determine what he had done wrong. One evening, Kim's young daughter found him sitting in his workshop, staring at the failed bells with hollow eyes. She had watched her father grow thinner and more anxious with each attempt. "Father," she said quietly, "may I tell you something?" Kim barely looked at her. "What is it?" "I have watched you make these bells. Each time, you stand over the furnace, controlling everything. You watch the metal like you are forcing it to obey you. But metal has its own nature. Fire has its own way. Perhaps they do not want to be controlled so tightly." Kim frowned. "What are you suggesting? That I simply let the metal do whatever it wants? That would be chaos." His daughter shook her head. "Not chaos. Trust. You know how to make bells, father. You have made many beautiful ones. But those bells you made with confidence, not fear. Now you are so afraid of failure that you try to control everything. Maybe the metal can feel your fear." Kim wanted to dismiss his daughter's words. She was young and she knew nothing about metallurgy or craftsmanship. But something in what she said unsettled him. He realized she was right. With each attempt, he had tried harder to control every variable. His grip had grown tighter and tighter. That night, Kim made a decision. He would attempt the bell one final time. But this time, he would prepare everything carefully, then step back. He would trust the process he had learned over decades of work. The next day, Kim prepared the mold and calculated the measurements as before. But when the time came to pour the bronze, he did something different. He lit the furnace, checked that everything was in place, and then he walked away from the workshop. His assistants were shocked. "Master, where are you going? Who will supervise the pour?" Kim looked back at them calmly. "You will. You know what to do. I have taught you well. I will return when the bell has cooled." He walked to the nearby temple and sat in meditation. For hours, he simply breathed and let go. He released his need to control the outcome. He accepted that the bell would turn out however it was meant to turn out. When he returned to the workshop the next morning, his assistants were waiting with strange expressions on their faces. Kim's heart prepared for disappointment. "Master," one of them said, "you should see it." They led him to the bell. It was perfect. The surface was smooth and unblemished. When they struck it, the sound that rang out was extraordinary. It was clear and resonant, carrying a quality that none of Kim's previous bells had possessed. The tone seemed to contain both joy and sorrow, strength and gentleness. It was the sound of something that had been allowed to become itself. The king was delighted. The bell was installed in the temple, and for generations people spoke of its remarkable voice. They said it was the most beautiful bell ever cast in Korea. Kim never forgot the lesson. The bell that succeeded was the one he had tried least to control. This story speaks to the exhaustion many of us carry. We try to control everything in our lives. We micromanage our work, our relationships, our futures. We lie awake making backup plans for our backup plans, trying to account for every possible outcome. This constant effort to control creates tremendous stress. We pour all our energy into forcing things to go according to our plan, and when they do not, we feel like failures. We grip tighter, work harder, sleep less. But life, like molten bronze, has its own nature. The more rigidly we try to control it, the more it resists us. The tighter we grip, the more cracks appear. There is wisdom in preparation. Kim did not abandon his skill or knowledge. He still used everything he had learned, but he released his fearful need to dominate every moment of the process. He learned the difference between skillful effort and anxious control. When you lie awake, trying to control tomorrow, remember Kim and his bell. Do what you can with skill and care. Then release your grip. Trust that you have done enough. Some things must be allowed to become what they will become. The bell that rang most beautifully was the one cast without fear. Story 4. Nan-in's Teacup. In the late 19th century, there lived a renowned Zen master named Nan-in. His temple was located in the mountains of Japan, and students traveled from distant places to learn from him. Nan-in was known for his direct teaching style and his ability to convey profound truths through simple actions. One day, a university professor came to visit Nan-in. The professor was a learned man, respected in academic circles for his knowledge of philosophy and religion. He had read extensively about Zen Buddhism and had formed many opinions about its teachings. The professor arrived at Nan-in's temple in the afternoon. He was shown to a simple room where the master was waiting. Nan-in greeted him with a bow and invited him to sit. "I have come to learn about Zen," the professor announced as he settled onto the cushion. But before Nan-in could respond, the professor continued. "I have studied Eastern philosophy for many years. I have read the ancient texts and attended lectures by various teachers. In my view, Zen shares many similarities with Western existentialism, particularly in its approach to..." The professor talked on. He explained his theories about meditation, his interpretations of koans, his analysis of different Buddhist schools. He compared and contrasted, quoted scholars, and referenced his own published papers. Nan-in said nothing. He simply stood and began preparing tea. The professor barely noticed. He continued talking as Nan-in set out 2 cups, heated the water, and measured the tea leaves. Of course, the concept of emptiness is particularly interesting when viewed through the lens of phenomenology. One could argue that. Nan-in began to pour the tea into the professor's cup. The cup filled to the brim, but Nan-in kept pouring. The tea overflowed, spilling onto the saucer. Still, Nan-in continued to pour. The tea ran off the saucer onto the wooden table. It began dripping onto the floor. Nan-in's hand remained steady, pouring more tea. Finally, the professor stopped talking. "Master, the cup is full. No more will go in. You must stop." Nan-in set down the teapot and looked at the professor directly for the first time. "Like this cup," he said quietly, "you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked down at the overflowing teacup, at the tea pooling on the table, at the mess that had been created by pouring into something that had no space to receive. For the first time in many years, the professor had nothing to say. Nan sat down across from him. "You came here to learn, but you have already decided what Zen is. You arrived with your cup full. Every question you ask, you have already answered in your mind. Every teaching I might offer, you have already interpreted according to your existing beliefs." The professor sat in silence, confronting an uncomfortable truth. He had come to this mountain temple not to learn, but to confirm what he already thought he knew. His mind had been so full of his own ideas that there was no room for anything new to enter. "How do I empty my cup?" the professor asked finally, his voice humbler than before. Nan-in smiled slightly. "You have already begun. The first step is recognizing that your cup is full." The professor stayed at the temple for 3 days. During that time, he spoke very little. He sat in meditation, helped with simple tasks, and observed rather than analyzed. When he finally left, he bowed deeply to Nan-in. "Thank you for showing me that I knew nothing," he said. Nan-in returned the bow. "Now your cup has space. Now we can begin." This story addresses a particular kind of stress that keeps many of us awake at night. Our minds are constantly full of thoughts, opinions, worries, plans, judgments, and interpretations. Like the professor's teacup, there is no room for anything new. We replay conversations, analyzing what was said and what we should have said. We rehearse tomorrow's meetings, planning our responses to scenarios that may never happen. We review our day, judging ourselves and others. Our minds are so crowded that even when we try to rest, there is no space for rest to enter. The stress this creates is exhausting. We are like someone carrying a cup that is constantly overflowing, spilling our mental energy everywhere, never able to simply set it down. Nan-in's lesson was not complicated. Before you can receive anything new, before peace can enter, before rest can come, you must first create space. You must empty the cup. This does not mean abandoning knowledge or experience. The professor's learning was not worthless, but it had become a barrier rather than a foundation. His attachment to what he already knew prevented him from being present to what was actually in front of him. As you prepare for sleep, notice how full your cup is. How many thoughts are circling? How many plans and worries are filling every available space in your mind? You do not need to solve them all before you sleep. You do not need to think them through one more time. You simply need to recognize that your cup is full and choose to set it down for the night. Empty your cup. The thoughts will still be there tomorrow if you need them. But tonight, create space. Let the overflowing stop. Rest comes when there is finally room for it to enter. Story 5. Bankei'S Unborn Mind. In the peaceful countryside of 17th century Japan, there lived a Zen master named Bankei who had discovered something profound and simple. Unlike many Zen teachers who used complex koans and riddles, Bankei taught about the unborn mind, the pure, original mind that existed before thoughts, emotions, and concepts arose. Bankei's teaching was so clear and accessible that people from all walks of life flocked to hear him. Farmers, merchants, samurai, and scholars all came to his simple temple, drawn by his reputation for making the deepest truths understandable to ordinary people. He never turned anyone away, believing that enlightenment was not reserved for monks alone, but was the birthright of every human being. One warm summer afternoon, Bankei was giving a Dharma talk to a large gathering in the temple hall. Several hundred people sat on the wooden floor, listening attentively as he spoke about the unborn, that pristine awareness that is always present, always peaceful, never disturbed by circumstances. His voice was gentle but firm, his words simple but penetrating. "The unborn is your original mind," he explained. "It is always clear, always peaceful, always perfect. When you live from this unborn mind, there is no problem that can truly disturb you. All suffering comes from forgetting this original nature and creating thoughts and emotions that cloud it." As he spoke, a man in the audience, a merchant with a weathered face and troubled eyes, raised his hand. Bankei nodded, inviting him to speak. "Master," the man said, his voice filled with frustration, "your teaching sounds beautiful, but I don't think it applies to me. I have a terrible problem with anger. It's my inborn nature. I was born with a short temper. My father was the same, and his father before him. But when something upsets me, rage just erupts from inside, and I can't control it. I've tried for years to change, but this anger is just part of who I am. How can someone like me, with this defect in my character, ever experience this unborn mind you speak of?" The crowd murmured sympathetically. Many recognized themselves in this honest confession. Anger, anxiety, jealousy, these emotions felt so fundamental, so much a part of their very nature. Perhaps enlightenment was indeed only for those born with better temperaments. Bankei looked at the man with kind, penetrating eyes. Then his face broke into a slight smile and he said something unexpected. "That's very interesting. An inborn anger, what a rare condition. Please, I would very much like to see this anger of yours. Can you show it to me right now?" The merchant looked confused. "Well, I can't show it to you right now. It isn't here at this moment." "I see," Bankei said calmly. "So it's not actually present right now?" "No," the merchant admitted. "It only comes when something provokes me, when someone insults me, or when things don't go as I planned, or when I'm treated unfairly." "Ah!" Bankei exclaimed, his eyes twinkling with gentle wisdom. "So this anger doesn't exist right now. It only appears under certain conditions. Tell me, if it were truly inborn, truly part of your original nature, wouldn't it be present all the time? If you were born with it, you should be able to show it to me at any moment, just as you can show me your hand or your face. But you just admitted that it isn't here right now." The merchant sat in stunned silence, his mouth slightly open as the words sank in. Bankei continued, his voice warm with compassion. "What you call inborn anger is not inborn at all. Your parents didn't give it to you. The universe didn't create you with this defect. What actually happens is this. Something occurs that you don't like, and then your thoughts create a story about it. This is unfair, I've been wronged, this shouldn't be happening. These thoughts generate the feeling you call anger. Then you pick up this anger and carry it around, claiming it as mine, making it part of your identity, even saying it was born with you." The hall was completely silent now. Every person present was examining their own mind, seeing the truth of what Bankei was revealing. "Your original mind, the unborn, is like a clear mirror," Bankei went on. "When a red object passes before it, the mirror reflects red. When a blue object passes, it reflects blue. But the mirror itself is never stained by the colors it reflects. When the objects move away, the mirror returns to its original clarity. It doesn't hold on to the red or blue and say, 'This is my inborn color.'" He leaned forward slightly, his gaze encompassing everyone in the hall. "Your anger is like that. When certain conditions arise, anger appears in the clear mirror of your mind. But you are not the anger. You are the mirror. The anger is just something passing through. When you believe it's yours or inborn, you pick it up and carry it, adding unnecessary suffering to your life." The merchant's eyes were now bright with tears of recognition. "Master, I've been carrying this story about myself for so long. I've told myself for decades that I'm an angry person, that it's just my nature. And in believing this, I've actually been creating the very anger I thought I was born with." "Exactly," Bankei said with delight. "You've been creating it all along, and here's the wonderful news. If you created it, you can stop creating it. You don't need to fight against anger or try to destroy it. You simply need to stop picking it up in the first place. Stop believing the story that it's yours. Return to the unborn mind, which is already peaceful, already complete, already free." Another person in the audience, a young woman, raised her hand hesitantly. "Master, if I understand correctly, you're saying that all our negative emotions are like this? We create them through our thoughts and beliefs?" "Yes," Bankei replied. "Anger, anxiety, jealousy, resentment, these are not defects you were born with. They are habits of mind, patterns of thinking that you've practiced so often they feel automatic, even natural. But they are not your true nature. Your true nature is the unborn, clear, bright, untroubled awareness." "But Master," the woman persisted, "if it's so simple, why do we keep creating these painful emotions? Why don't we just stay in the unborn mind all the time?" Bankei smiled gently. Because you forget. You've spent years, perhaps lifetimes, practicing the habit of picking up thoughts and emotions and identifying with them. You've become very skilled at creating a self with all its problems and stories. Returning to the unborn requires simply remembering what you truly are, the clear space in which all experiences arise and pass. An elderly man spoke up. How do we remember, Master? Is there a practice we should do? The simplest practice is this, Bankei answered. When you notice that you've picked up a thought or emotion, when you catch yourself in the middle of creating your anger or worry, simply recognize it. Say to yourself, I'm doing it again, I'm creating this. Then without judgment, without making it another problem, just put it down. Return to the awareness that noticed it in the first place. That awareness is the unborn mind. What if the emotion is very strong? Someone asked. What if it feels overwhelming? Even a very strong emotion is still something you're creating in the moment, Bankei explained. It may feel powerful, but it has no existence apart from your moment-to-moment participation in it. When you stop fueling it with your thoughts and attention, it naturally subsides, not because you fought against it, but because you stopped creating it. The original merchant who had asked about anger spoke again, his voice now quiet with wonder. Master, I feel something right now, a lightness, as if a burden I didn't even know I was carrying has been put down. That's because you have put it down, Bankei said warmly. That lightness, that sense of relief, that's your original nature revealing itself. It was always there, beneath the story of being an angry person. You simply stopped obscuring it with false beliefs about yourself. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the temple windows, Bankei offered his final words for the evening. Remember, the unborn mind is not something you need to achieve or attain. It is what you already are. Every single person in this hall already possesses it completely. You are not broken. You are never defective. All the problems you think define you are like clouds passing across the sky. They may temporarily obscure the sun, but they never diminish its light. Your work is not to create a new, better self. Your work is simply to stop creating the false self made of thoughts and stories. He paused, looking at each person with infinite compassion. Right now, in this moment, if you're not creating any problem in your mind, if you're simply here, aware, present, what is wrong? When you put down all your stories about yourself, all your beliefs about your defects and limitations, what remains? The unborn remains. Peace remains. Your true nature remains. This unborn mind operates perfectly, he continued. Right now, it's allowing you to hear these words. It's allowing you to see, to breathe, to be aware. You don't have to do any of this. It's happening effortlessly through the unborn. When you trust this and stop interfering with unnecessary thoughts and emotions, life flows naturally, and you move through the world with the ease of water flowing down a stream. One final question came from a young monk. Master Bankei, does living from the unborn mind mean we become passive? That we don't care about anything? Not at all, Bankei replied. The unborn is not dead or indifferent. It responds perfectly to each situation. When action is needed, action happens. When rest is needed, rest happens. But it all flows naturally, without the extra suffering created by our stories and resistance. You can still prefer health to sickness, comfort to pain, but you don't create additional mental torment by fighting against what is. As the gathering came to a close and people began to leave, many approached Bankei to bow in gratitude. The merchant with the inborn anger knelt before him with tears streaming down his face. Master, I've been to many teachers seeking help with my anger. They all gave me techniques, breathing exercises, mantras to recite, ways to control my temper. But you're the first person who showed me that there was nothing that needed to be controlled or fixed. You've given me the greatest gift, the truth that I am already whole. Bankei placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. I didn't give you anything you didn't already have. I simply pointed to what was always there. Now go and live from this understanding. When you forget, and you will forget sometimes because old habits are strong, simply remember again. Each time you remember, it becomes easier. The unborn is patient. It waits for you eternally because it is what you are. In the days and weeks that followed, the merchant found that his relationship with anger had fundamentally changed. Provocations that once would have sent him into rage now appeared in his awareness like clouds passing through the sky. He could see them arise, notice the impulse to identify with them, and watch them pass without becoming his anger. Sometimes he forgot and fell back into old patterns, picking up the anger and carrying it. But now, even in the middle of rage, he could hear Bankei's voice. "Can you show me this inborn anger?" And he would realize, "I'm doing it again. I'm creating this right now." And in that recognition, the anger would lose its grip, revealing once more the clear, peaceful awareness that had been there all along. Bankei continued teaching the unborn mind for many years, and his approach, so simple, so direct, so free from complexity, helped countless people discover their original nature. He never asked them to become something they weren't. He never gave them impossible practices or years of arduous training. He simply showed them what they had been overlooking: the peaceful, complete, unborn awareness that was reading their thoughts, feeling their emotions, experiencing their lives. The witness that had been there before the first thought arose, and would remain after the last thought faded. And in the evenings, when the temple was quiet and empty, Bankei would sometimes sit alone in the fading light, a gentle smile on his face, knowing that scattered across the countryside were people who had finally put down their unnecessary burdens and remembered what they truly were. Not the stories, not the emotions, not the endless mental commentary, but the clear, bright, unchanging, unborn mind that had been their home all along. Story 6. Hakuin's reputation. In a small Japanese village, there lived a Zen master named Hakuin. He was deeply respected by the villagers for his wisdom, discipline, and peaceful presence. People came from neighboring towns to hear his teachings. Parents pointed him out to their children as an example of virtue. His reputation was spotless. Near Hakuin's temple lived a family with a beautiful teenage daughter. The girl's parents were strict and protective, carefully guarding their daughter's honor and their family's reputation in the community. One day, the girl discovered she was pregnant. Her parents were horrified. They demanded to know who the father was. The girl was terrified of the truth. The real father was a young man who worked at the fish market, someone her parents would never approve of. In her panic and fear, she said the first name that came to mind, a name that would redirect her parents' anger away from her young lover. "It was Hakuin," she said. "The master is the father." The parents were stunned, then enraged. The monk they had revered, the teacher they had trusted, had betrayed everything he claimed to stand for. Their shock quickly turned to fury. The father stormed to Hakuin's temple and confronted him in front of several students. "You hypocrite," he shouted. "You stand here teaching about virtue and discipline while you have dishonored my daughter. She is pregnant and she says you are the father." The students gasped. The other villagers who heard began to whisper. Everyone waited for Hakuin's response, for his denial, for his defense. Hakuin looked at the angry father calmly. He said only 2 words, "Is that so?" The father was taken aback by the lack of denial, but he interpreted it as an admission of guilt. "Yes, that is so, and you will take responsibility." Hakuin bowed slightly. "Is that so?" he repeated. News of the scandal spread through the village like fire through dry grass. Hakuin's reputation was destroyed overnight. People who had bowed to him respectfully now turned away when he passed. Parents forbade their children from going near the temple. Former students abandoned him. The respect he had built over decades vanished in a single day. Hakuin continued his life as before. He meditated, worked in the garden, and maintained the temple. He showed no signs of shame or distress. When people spat insults at him in the street, he walked on quietly. When former friends avoided him, he did not chase after them to explain. He simply said, when anyone confronted him, "Is that so?" 9 months later, the baby was born. The girl's parents wanted nothing to do with the child born from such disgrace. They wrapped the infant in cloth, carried him to Hakuin's temple, and thrust the baby into his arms. "This is your responsibility now," the father said bitterly. "You brought this shame upon us. You will raise this child." Hakuin looked down at the tiny baby in his arms. "Is that so?" he said gently. Then he bowed and accepted the child. Hakuin, who had never raised a child, now became a father. He cared for the infant with the same attention he brought to his meditation practice. He begged food from neighbors for the baby, though many slammed their doors in his face. He walked long distances to find milk. He stayed up through the night when the child cried. He changed diapers, sang lullabies, and rocked the baby to sleep. Through all of this, his own reputation remained in ruins, but Hakuin showed no concern for what others thought. He simply took care of the child with complete dedication. A year passed. The girl who had falsely named Hakuin could no longer bear the weight of her lie. The guilt consumed her until finally she broke down and confessed the truth to her parents. The father was not Hakuin. It was the young man from the fish market. She had lied out of fear. The parents were struck with horror at what they had done. They had destroyed an innocent man's reputation. They had forced him to raise a child that was not his. The shame they felt now was far greater than any they had experienced before. The father and mother went immediately to Hakuin's temple. They found him in the garden, the child strapped to his back as he tended the vegetables. When Hakuin saw them approach, he straightened and waited. The father fell to his knees. "Master, we have wronged you terribly. Our daughter has confessed. You are not the father. We have destroyed your good name for nothing. Please, please forgive us. We will tell everyone the truth. We will restore your reputation." Hakuin listened quietly. Then he untied the cloth that held the baby to his back and gently placed the child in the mother's arms. "Is that so?" he said. That was all. No anger, no demand for apology, no speech about the suffering he had endured. He simply handed back the child and returned to his gardening as if nothing significant had happened. The parents spread the truth throughout the village. Hakuin's reputation was restored. People began returning to the temple, bowing apologetically, asking to resume their studies. Within weeks, everything returned to how it had been before. Through it all, when his reputation was destroyed and when it was restored, Hakuin remained exactly the same. Peaceful, present, undisturbed. This story speaks to a stress that torments many of us, the fear of what others think. We lie awake, replaying moments when we embarrassed ourselves or said something foolish. We worry about our reputation, our image, what people are saying about us behind our backs. We defend ourselves constantly, anxious that any criticism or misunderstanding will damage how we are perceived. Hakuin's response to false accusation was not to defend himself or prove his innocence. He did not argue or demand justice. He simply accepted what came and continued living according to his own inner truth. When the entire village believed he had committed a shameful act, his inner peace did not change. When everyone praised him again after the truth came out, his inner peace still did not change. He was not dependent on external validation for his sense of self. The stress of managing our reputation is enormous. We try to control what others think, to shape their perceptions, to defend against every criticism. But reputations are built on opinions, and opinions are like weather, constantly shifting and beyond our control. Hakuin understood something profound. Your reputation is not who you are. It is simply what others currently believe about you, based on incomplete information. Whether that belief is accurate or wildly false makes no difference to your actual nature. When you stop trying to control your reputation, when you stop defending yourself against every misunderstanding, a tremendous weight lifts. You are no longer at the mercy of others' judgments. You can simply be who you are and let others think what they will. This does not mean you should not care about acting with integrity. Hakuin lived with great integrity. But his integrity was internal, not performed for an audience. As you lie here tonight, notice how much energy you spend managing how others perceive you. How many moments from today are you replaying, wishing you had said or done something differently so people would think better of you? What if you could respond to all of it the way Hakuin did? What if you could simply say, "Is that so?" and let it be? Your reputation will rise and fall throughout your life, regardless of what you do. People will misunderstand you, misjudge you, and sometimes falsely accuse you. You cannot prevent this, but you can choose not to let it disturb your inner peace. Hakuin slept peacefully through the entire ordeal, when he was slandered and when he was praised, because his peace did not depend on either. Story 7. The Master and the Assassin. In the mountains of feudal Japan, there lived a Zen master named Shichiri Kojin. He was known not for the size of his temple or the number of his students, but for the depth of his practice. Shichiri spent most of his days in meditation, sitting perfectly still for hours, undisturbed by the world around him. One afternoon, while Shichiri was deep in meditation in his small temple, a man entered through the door. This was no ordinary visitor. He was a ronin, a masterless samurai, and he had a reputation throughout the region as a skilled and ruthless assassin. He had killed many men and felt no remorse. The assassin had been hired to kill Shichiri. The master had once testified against a local warlord in a dispute over land, and the warlord wanted revenge. The assassin had tracked Shichiri to this remote temple, climbed the mountain path, and now stood in the doorway with his hand on the hilt of his sword. Shichiri sat motionless on his meditation cushion, his eyes closed, his breathing steady and calm. He had heard the assassin enter, but did not open his eyes or acknowledge his presence. The assassin drew his sword. The blade whispered out of its scabbard, razor-sharp and gleaming. He held it ready, prepared to strike. But something made him hesitate. The master's complete stillness was unnerving. Most people, when facing death, showed some reaction. Fear in their eyes, tension in their shoulders, a quickening of breath. But Shichiri sat as if he were alone in the temple, as if no armed man stood 3 paces away, ready to end his life. "Old man," the assassin said, his voice hard, "I have come to kill you, do you understand?" Shichiri's eyes remained closed. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and unhurried. "I understand, but I am in the middle of something important. Please wait a moment until I have finished." The assassin stood frozen, his sword still raised. Never in all his years of killing had anyone responded this way. People begged for their lives. They tried to run or fight, they offered money, they pleaded. But this monk was asking him to wait while he finished meditating. "How long?" the assassin demanded, uncertain what else to say. "Not long," Shichiri replied. "Perhaps 15 minutes. Then the master settled back into absolute stillness. His breathing slowed. His face became serene. He appeared to have completely forgotten the armed man standing before him. The assassin did not know what to do. He had been hired to kill, and he would fulfill his contract. But something about the master's response had thrown him off balance. He lowered his sword slightly and waited. 15 minutes passed. The temple was completely silent except for the sound of wind in the pine trees outside. The assassin found himself watching Shichiri's face, observing the deep peace there. He had never seen anyone so completely at ease. Despite himself, the assassin's own breathing began to slow. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. The rage that usually fueled his work seemed to quiet in the presence of such profound calm. Finally, Shichiri opened his eyes. He looked at the assassin with the same expression he might give a guest who had come for tea. There was no fear in his gaze, but also no defiance or challenge, just a clear, direct presence. "Thank you for waiting," Shichiri said. "I have completed what I needed to do. Now you may proceed with your work." The assassin stared at him. "You have finished meditating, and now you are ready to die?" "I have finished what needed to be finished," Shichiri replied simply. Whether I die or not is not something I control. That is your decision. I have made mine. And what decision is that? To complete my practice before I am interrupted by whatever comes next. Death, if it comes, will come. But it seemed important not to leave my meditation unfinished. The assassin's sword arm trembled slightly. You are not afraid? Shichiri considered the question. Fear is natural when facing death, but fear does not need to control my actions. I chose to finish sitting. Now I choose to meet whatever comes with the same presence I brought to my meditation. Something in the assassin's chest tightened. He had killed many men, but never one like this. His victims had all clung desperately to life, which made them easy to despise. But this monk was not clinging. He was simply present, meeting his death with the same attention he would bring to any other moment. The assassin slowly lowered his sword completely. I cannot kill you, he said, his voice rough. Why not? Shichiri asked, genuinely curious. Because you are already beyond death. What would I be killing? A man who fears nothing, who clings to nothing. There's no satisfaction in such a death. Shichiri smiled slightly. I am not beyond death. I will die like everyone else. But I have tried to live each moment completely, so that when death comes I have no regrets about time wasted or presence withheld. The assassin stood silently for a long moment. Then, in a gesture that surprised even himself, he knelt before the master and placed his sword on the ground. Teach me, he said. Shichiri looked at the hardened killer kneeling before him. What do you wish to learn? How to face death the way you just did. How to have such peace. The peace does not come from facing death, Shichiri replied. It comes from facing each moment fully. I was not preparing to die. I was simply completing my meditation. Death would have been just the next moment. The assassin became Shichiri's student. He never worked as a killer again. Years later, when people asked him what had transformed him, he would say, I met a man who showed me that the greatest strength is not in the ability to kill, but in the ability to be completely present, even when death is 3 paces away. This story addresses perhaps the deepest stress we carry, the fear of death and loss. We lie awake, worrying about illness, accidents, the safety of those we love. We carry constant anxiety about all the ways our lives could end or fall apart. Shichiri's response to the assassin teaches something radical. He did not overcome his fear by denying death or pretending it was not happening. He simply refused to let the fear of death prevent him from completing what mattered in the present moment. His meditation was unfinished. That was what required his attention. Whether he would be alive in 20 minutes was not something he could control. So he did not waste his final moments trying to control it. This is the paradox. The people who fear death least are often those who live most fully in each moment. When you are completely present to what is in front of you right now, death loses some of its power over you. Most of our fear about death is actually fear of unlived life. We are afraid of dying before we have truly lived, before we have done what matters, before we have been fully present. Shichiri could face death calmly because he had no backlog of unlived moments. He had been fully present to his life as it unfolded. The stress you carry about all the terrible things that might happen is stealing your attention from the life you have right now. You cannot prevent death or loss. They will come when they come, but you can choose what to do with the moments you have. As you prepare for sleep tonight, consider this. If these were your final hours, what would you most regret not having done? Not grand achievements or distant goals, but simple presence. Moments you missed because you were worried about other moments. You do not need to face a literal assassin to practice Shichiri's wisdom. You simply need to finish what is in front of you before moving to the next thing. To be fully here before concerning yourself with what might happen there. The master completed his meditation even with a sword raised above him. You can complete this day, release it, and rest, knowing you were present to what mattered. Death will come when it comes. Until then, there is only this moment and then the next one, each deserving your full attention. Story 8. The Sound of One Hand. In a monastery in old Japan, there lived a young monk named Toyo. He was only 12 years old, the youngest student at the temple. Every evening, he watched the older monks go to the master's room for private instruction. He heard them discussing something called koans, paradoxical questions that had no logical answers. Toyo wanted desperately to study koans like the older students. One day, he gathered his courage and approached the master, Mokurai. "Master," Toyo said, bowing low, "I wish to study koans like the senior monks. May I receive instruction?" Mokurai looked at the young boy with serious eyes. "You are very young, Toyo. Koan study requires great maturity. But I see your sincerity. Very well. I will give you a koan." Toyo's heart leaped with excitement. "Listen carefully," Mokurai said. "You can hear the sound of two hands when they clap together. Now show me the sound of one hand." Toyo bowed and left the room, determined to solve this puzzle. He sat in his small room and thought. The sound of one hand. What could that mean? He raised one hand and moved it through the air. Silence. He tried clapping it against his leg. That was just his leg making sound, not one hand alone. He waved it quickly, but that only created a slight whisper of air. Days passed. Toyo could think of nothing else. The question consumed him. What is the sound of one hand? One evening, he was walking past the room where the geishas were practicing their music. He heard the delicate notes of a samisen, a three-stringed instrument. His eyes lit up. That was it. Music was the sound of one hand playing the strings. Excitedly, he went to Mokurai's room. "Master, I have found it. The sound of one hand is music." Mokurai shook his head. "No, that is the sound of strings and fingers together. Go back and try again." Toyo returned to his practice, discouraged but not defeated. Days turned into weeks. He listened to everything around him, searching for the answer. He heard water dripping from the roof after rain. That must be it. He rushed to Mokurai. "Master, the sound of one hand is dripping water." "No," Mokurai said calmly. "That is the sound of water and earth. Try again." Toyo tried wind sighing through the trees. Rejected. He tried the sound of an owl hooting in the night. Rejected. He tried the cry of a child. Rejected. Every sound he brought to his master was dismissed. Months passed. Toyo became obsessed with the koan. He could barely eat or sleep. His mind circled endlessly around the question, what is the sound of one hand? There had to be an answer. Everything made a sound. Even one hand must make some sound he was missing. He tried the buzzing of insects, the croaking of frogs, the rustling of silk robes, the crackling of fire, the ringing of temple bells. Each time, Mokurai sent him away with the same instruction. Try again. Toyo grew frustrated, then desperate. He had tried every sound in the world. What was left? His fellow students began to whisper that he was wasting his time, that he should give up this impossible task. One night, after nearly a year of searching, Toyo sat alone in the meditation hall. He was exhausted. His mind, which had been racing for months, suddenly grew quiet. He had nothing left to try. No more sounds to offer. No more clever answers. In that moment of complete surrender, something shifted inside him. He realized he had been searching in the wrong direction. He had been trying to find a sound that already existed in the world, trying to solve the koan with his thinking mind. But the koan was not a puzzle to be solved with logic. It was a barrier designed to exhaust his logical mind, to force him beyond thinking into direct experience. Toyo sat with this realization. The question was not asking him to find a sound. It was asking him to understand something that could not be captured in words or sounds. It was pointing to something beyond all distinctions, beyond the duality of sound and silence, beyond one hand and two hands. When he finally understood, he did not rush to his master with another answer. He simply sat in the profound silence that had opened inside him. The next morning, Toyo went to Mokurai's room. He entered, bowed, and sat in silence. Mokurai looked at him. "Have you brought me the sound of one hand?" Toyo remained silent. He did not offer a sound. He did not offer an explanation. He simply sat, present and still, his face peaceful. Mokurai watched him for a long moment, then smiled. "You have heard it," he said quietly. Toyo bowed. The koan was complete. This story speaks to a particular kind of stress, the exhaustion that comes from trying to solve problems that cannot be solved through thinking alone. We lie awake at night, turning over the same questions, approaching them from different angles, desperately seeking answers that our analytical minds cannot provide. Some problems in life are like koans. They cannot be resolved through more thinking, more analysis, more effort. In fact, the harder we try to solve them with our minds, the more stuck we become. Toyo spent months searching for a sound that existed in the physical world. Every answer he brought was correct in its own way, but it missed the point. The question was not asking him to find something external. It was asking him to exhaust his external searching and discover something internal. Only when he stopped trying to solve the koan did he understand it. Only when his mind became quiet from exhaustion did the answer reveal itself, not as a sound or a concept, but as a direct understanding beyond words. Many of the worries that keep you awake are like this. You circle around them endlessly, trying to think your way to resolution. Should I take this job or that one? Did I make the right decision? What does this relationship mean? What should I do with my life? These questions can consume infinite mental energy without ever reaching a satisfying answer, because they are not problems to be solved through thinking. They are experiences to be lived through, to be understood not with the analytical mind, but with a deeper wisdom that emerges only when the thinking mind finally grows quiet. The sound of one hand is not something you can hear with your ears. Similarly, some of life's deepest questions cannot be answered with the thinking mind. They require a different kind of knowing, one that comes from stillness rather than effort. As you lie here tonight, notice which questions your mind keeps returning to. Which problems are you trying to solve for the 100th time? What if those questions are like Toyo's koan? What if the searching itself is the obstacle, and the answer will only come when you stop searching? You do not need to solve everything tonight. Some understanding comes not from trying harder, but from finally stopping the effort and allowing a different kind of wisdom to emerge. Toyo tried for a year before he understood, but his understanding came not in the moment of greatest effort, but in the moment he surrendered the effort completely. Let your thinking mind rest. The answers it can provide, it has already given. What remains may require a different approach entirely. The approach of silence, of waiting, of allowing understanding to arise on its own. The sound of one hand is heard only when you stop listening for it. Story 9. The Gates of Paradise. In feudal Japan, there lived a fierce samurai warrior named Nobushige. He was renowned throughout the land for his skill with the sword and his courage in battle. Nobushige had fought in countless wars and defeated many opponents. He feared no man. But despite his strength and success, Nobushige was troubled by questions he could not answer with his sword. He had seen death many times, dealt it with his own hands, and watched comrades fall beside him. These experiences had stirred something in him, a need to understand what lay beyond this life. He had heard of a Zen master named Hakuin, who lived in a small temple in the mountains. People said this master possessed great wisdom and could answer questions that others could not. Nobushige decided to visit him. The samurai traveled to Hakuin's temple, his swords at his side, his armor marking him as a warrior of high rank. He found the master sitting quietly in a simple room, wearing plain robes, looking nothing like the impressive figure Nobushige had expected. Nobushige entered without the usual courtesies. He was accustomed to respect and deference from others. He stood before Hakuin and spoke bluntly. "Monk, I have come to ask you about heaven and hell. Do they exist? Where are the gates of paradise? Where are the gates of hell?" Hakuin looked up at the samurai standing before him, radiating arrogance and impatience. The master studied him for a moment, then spoke in a dismissive tone. You? You wish to know about heaven and hell? Look at you. You are nothing but a crude soldier. Your hands are fit only for violence. Your mind is dull and brutish. You could never understand such refined matters. You are wasting my time. Leave." Nobushige's face flushed red. No one spoke to him this way. His hand moved instantly to the hilt of his sword. How dare this monk insult him? He was a respected warrior, and this common priest had treated him like a fool. His fingers wrapped around the sword handle. Rage poured through him. He began to draw the blade from its scabbard, ready to cut down this insolent monk who had shown him such disrespect. At that precise moment, with the sword halfway out of its sheath and murder in the samurai's eyes, Hakuin looked at him calmly and said, "Here open the gates of hell." Nobushige froze. The word struck him like a physical blow. He stood there, sword half drawn, rage still burning in his chest, and suddenly he saw himself clearly. He saw what he had become in that instant. A man consumed by anger, ready to kill over words, controlled completely by his wounded pride. He saw the hell he had created inside himself, the suffering born from his own reactivity and ego. In that moment of recognition, the anger drained from him. He saw the master's wisdom. Hakuin had deliberately provoked him, not out of cruelty, but to show him something essential. The monk had risked his own life to give Nobushige a direct experience of hell. The samurai's hand released the sword. It slid back into its scabbard with a soft click. He felt the rage dissolve, replaced by profound gratitude and humility. Here was a teacher who had shown him truth not through words but through direct experience. Tears came to Nobushige's eyes. He dropped to his knees and bowed deeply before Hakuin, his forehead touching the floor. "Forgive me, master. Thank you for this teaching." Hakuin smiled gently and said, "And here open the gates of paradise." In that instant, Nobushige understood. Heaven and hell were not distant places you arrived at after death. They were states of mind created moment by your own reactions and choices. When he was consumed by rage, ready to kill, he was in hell. It did not matter that he was standing in a peaceful temple. Hell was the state he carried inside himself. When he released that rage, when he opened to humility and gratitude, heaven appeared in the same location. Nothing external had changed. The room was the same. Hakuin was the same. But Nobushige's inner state had transformed completely. The gates of hell opened when he chose anger. The gates of paradise opened when he chose peace. Both existed in the same moment, in the same place. The only difference was which one he walked through. This story addresses a fundamental source of stress that keeps many of us awake. We believe our suffering is caused by external circumstances. We think we will find peace when our situation changes, when people treat us better, when we finally get what we want. But Hakuin showed Nobushige something radical. Your experience of heaven or hell depends not on what happens to you, but on how you respond to what happens. Nobushige could have killed Hakuin. He would have been legally justified in some contexts, defending his honor against insult. But that action would have created hell for him. A hell of guilt, consequence, and the knowledge that he had murdered a wise teacher over wounded pride. Instead, he chose differently. In the space between provocation and response, he found freedom. He saw his anger clearly, recognized it as the gate to hell, and chose not to walk through it. This is available to you in every moment. When someone insults you, when you face disappointment, when things do not go as planned, you stand before two gates. One leads to suffering, blame, resentment, anger, victimhood. The other leads to peace, acceptance, understanding, response rather than reaction. The gates are not physical locations. They are choices you make in your mind and heart. You open them yourself with your thoughts and responses. As you lie here tonight, notice which gates you have been opening today. When that person annoyed you, which gate did you walk through? When you made that mistake, which gate did you choose? When you received bad news, which response did you select? You are not a victim of circumstances creating heaven or hell for you. You are choosing, moment by moment, which realm to inhabit. Nobushige was a powerful warrior, but his greatest enemy was not on any battlefield. It was the rage inside himself. And his greatest victory was not defeating an opponent but recognizing his own anger and choosing to release it. The same power exists in you. You cannot control what others say or do. You cannot prevent difficult circumstances from arising, but you can choose which gate to open. Right now, as you prepare for sleep, you can choose. You can replay today's frustrations, nurse your grievances, worry about tomorrow's challenges, and open the gates of hell in your own mind. Or you can release what is past, accept what is, and trust what will come. Opening the gates of paradise. Both are available, both are real. The choice is always yours. Hakuin risked his life to teach this lesson. He knew a samurai's sword could end him instantly, but he also knew that some truths can only be understood through direct experience. Nobushige needed to feel hell opening inside himself to understand what it was. Now you understand too. Heaven and hell are not waiting for you after death. They are here now, created by your own mind, entered through gates that only you can open. Which will you choose tonight? Story 10. Dogen'S, Shinjin, Datsuraku. In the early 13th century, in the mountains of Japan, there lived a young monk named Dogen who would become one of the most influential Zen masters in history. But at the age of 23, Dogen was not yet a master. He was a seeker consumed by a burning question that gave him no rest. Dogen had been born into a noble family, but tragedy struck early in his life. His father died when he was only 2 years old, and his beloved mother passed away when he was 7. At her deathbed, watching the incense smoke rise and fade, the young Dogen experienced his first deep insight into impermanence. Everything that exists, he realized, eventually disappears like that smoke. This understanding planted a seed of spiritual urgency in his heart. By the time he was 13, Dogen had ordained as a Buddhist monk on Mount Hiei, the center of Buddhist learning in Japan. He threw himself into study with intense dedication, mastering the sutras and philosophical texts with brilliant comprehension. But the more he studied, the more one question tormented him, keeping him awake at night, disturbing his meditation, refusing to be silenced by intellectual answers. The question was this: if all beings already possess Buddha nature, if enlightenment is our original nature as the teachings say, then why must we practice so hard to attain it? Why do we need to sit in meditation for hours, follow strict precepts, and struggle for years if we are already enlightened? What is the point of practice if there is nothing to achieve? Dogen brought this question to the most learned teachers on Mount Hiei. They gave him sophisticated philosophical answers, drawing from centuries of Buddhist scholarship. They explained the relationship between original enlightenment and acquired enlightenment, between potential and actualization. But their words, however elegant, never touched the core of his doubt. The question continued to burn. Finally, at age 23, Dogen made a radical decision. He would travel to China, the birthplace of Zen, to seek a master who could resolve his fundamental doubt. In 1223, he boarded a merchant ship and crossed the dangerous seas to Song Dynasty China, leaving behind everything familiar in pursuit of truth. For 2 years, Dogen traveled throughout China, visiting famous monasteries and studying with renowned masters. Each temple disappointed him. He found monks more concerned with rank and politics than with genuine practice, teachers who offered only intellectual explanations, and a spiritual landscape that seemed to have lost its vital essence. His question remained unanswered, and a deep discouragement began to settle in his heart. He was preparing to return to Japan, feeling that his journey had been a failure, when he heard about an elderly master named Rujing, who lived at Mount Tiantong. Unlike other famous masters who surrounded themselves with hundreds of students and elaborate temple politics, Master Rujing was known for his fierce commitment to simple, pure practice. Nothing but sitting meditation with no concern for attainment or recognition. Something in these reports stirred hope in Dogen's heart. With nothing to lose, he made his way to Mount Tiantong Monastery, a modest but dignified temple nestled in the misty mountains of Zhejiang province. When he arrived and first saw Master Rujing, he knew immediately he had found something different. Rujing was in his 60s, with a weathered face that radiated both sternness and profound kindness. His eyes held a clarity that Dogen had never encountered. Not the intellectual brilliance of scholars, but something deeper, simpler, more real. When Rujing looked at you, you felt he saw everything. All your pretensions, all your attachments, all your genuine aspiration, and accepted it all with unwavering compassion. "Why have you come to China?" Rujing asked when Dogen first stood before him. "I have a question that gives me no peace," Dogen replied. "If we already possess Buddha nature, why must we practice?" Rujing looked at him for a long moment, then said simply, "Stay here and sit." That was all. No philosophical discourse, no complex answer, just an invitation to practice. Dogen entered the monastery's practice schedule. The daily routine was rigorous but simple. Sitting meditation beginning before dawn, continuing throughout the day with breaks only for meals and sleep. The meditation hall was austere, wooden platforms along the walls where monks sat facing the wall in the posture the tradition called just sitting. No koans to solve, no techniques to master, no stages of enlightenment to achieve. Just sitting, just being present with complete attention, moment after moment, day after day. For months, Dogen sat. His body ached from the long hours of stillness. His mind created endless thoughts, doubts, plans, memories. The old question still circled in his consciousness. Why practice if we're already enlightened? What am I trying to achieve? Sometimes the question felt like a barrier to peace. Sometimes it felt like the only honest thing in his mind. Master Rujing moved through the meditation hall during practice periods, carrying a stick not to punish but to encourage, a sharp strike to the shoulder when someone's posture slumped or their energy flagged. But more often, Rujing simply sat with his students, embodying the very practice he taught. His presence was a teaching in itself. Upright, alert, completely present, with no sense of waiting for anything other than this moment. One thing Rujing could not tolerate was sleeping during meditation. To him, Zazen, sitting meditation, was not a time to rest or zone out. It was the most important activity of human life, the direct expression of awakened nature. When someone dozed off, Rujing would call out sharply, shocking them back to attention. The seasons turned. Summer heat gave way to autumn coolness, then to winter cold. Dogen continued sitting, his question gradually becoming less sharp, less urgent, more like a familiar companion than a torment. He was changing in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The intense striving that had characterized his earlier practice was slowly, imperceptibly loosening its grip. Then came the morning that would change everything. It was early summer, just before dawn. The meditation hall was dim, lit only by a few oil lamps creating pools of golden light in the darkness. The pre-dawn air was cool and still. Monks sat in their places along the walls, motionless forms facing the plain wooden walls. Outside, birds were beginning their first tentative songs, greeting the approaching day. Master Rujing was making his slow walk through the hall, his footsteps soft on the wooden floor. The atmosphere was thick with concentration, with presence, with the profound ordinariness of just sitting. Suddenly, Rujing's voice cut through the silence like a thunderbolt. "Zazen is Shinjin Datsuraku." The words shouted in Chinese meant meditation is the casting off of body and mind, or meditation is dropping body and mind. Rujing had stopped beside a monk who had dozed off, head drooping. The shout was directed at this drowsy practitioner. "In Zazen, you must cast off body and mind. How can you sleep?" The monk jerked awake, immediately correcting his posture. But in that same instant, sitting at his place against the wall, something happened to Dogen. The words struck him like lightning. Shinjin Datsuraku, cast off body and mind. In that moment, the question that had driven him for years, the question about why practice is necessary if Buddha nature is already present, simply fell away. Not because he found an answer, but because the question itself was revealed as based on a false assumption. He had been asking, "How can I, Dogen, attain enlightenment?" But in the flash of insight triggered by Rujing's shout, he saw that the very one asking the question, this I, this Dogen, this separate self trying to achieve something, was the illusion. What needed to be cast off was not some impediment to enlightenment, but the very one trying to become enlightened. Body and mind, these were not obstacles to be overcome or perfected. They were temporary formations to be released, dropped, cast off, not destroyed or rejected, but simply let go of as objects of clinging and identification. In that moment of dropping, what remained? Not Dogen achieving enlightenment, not even Buddha nature being realized. Just this, the cool air, the dim lamplight, the wooden wall, the sound of breathing, the absolute presence of being that had always been here, always been complete, never needed anything added or subtracted. Practice was not a path from delusion to enlightenment. Practice was enlightenment itself, expressing itself as practice. Sitting was not a method to become Buddha. Sitting was Buddha manifesting as sitting. The question dissolved because the questioner dissolved. Tears began streaming down Dogen's face. Not tears of sadness or even joy, something beyond both. Tears of recognition, of coming home, of the deepest relief imaginable. When the meditation period ended, Dogen went immediately to Rujing's quarters for private interview. He could barely speak, so full was his heart. Finally he managed to say, "Shinjin Datsuraku, body and mind have been cast off." Rujing looked at him with those penetrating eyes, seeing everything. Then he smiled, a rare sight, and said, "Body and mind cast off body and mind." It was confirmation, but also a warning. Don't make even this into a new attainment to grasp. Let it go too. Cast off even the casting off. "Yes," Dogen whispered. "Cast off body and mind." But another student who had witnessed this exchange later approached Rujing with skepticism. "Master, are you sure Dogen has truly understood? Perhaps he's just had some intellectual insight. How can you confirm his realization?" Rujing's face became stern. "He has cast off body and mind. Only one who has cast off body and mind could recognize this in another." In the days that followed, Dogen's practice deepened in a way impossible to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. Outwardly, nothing changed. He still sat, still followed the schedule, still lived the simple life of a monk. But inwardly, everything had transformed. Where before there had been striving, now there was just sitting. Where before there had been a sense of someone practicing to achieve something, now there was just practice itself, complete in each moment. Where before Zazen had been a means to an end, now it was recognized as the manifestation of the end itself. Buddha nature expressing itself as the simple act of sitting upright, breathing, being present. The questions that had tormented him for years now appeared in a completely different light. Why practice if you're already enlightened? Because practice is enlightenment, not a path to it. The sitting itself is the complete expression of Buddha nature, not a method to attain it someday. One afternoon, Dogen sat with Rujing in the master's simple quarters, drinking tea and watching clouds drift past the mountain peaks visible through the window. "Master," Dogen said, "for years I sought enlightenment as if it were something apart from me, something I could grasp and possess. I tried so hard to get it, to understand it, to achieve it." Rujing nodded, sipping his tea. "But Shinjin Datsuraku, when body and mind are cast off, what's left is what was always already here. Not something to be attained, but something to be recognized by ceasing to obscure it with all our grasping and striving." "Yes," Rujing said simply. "So practice is not about becoming Buddha," Dogen continued, speaking slowly as if discovering these words as he said them. "Practice is Buddha manifesting as practice. When we sit in Zazen with body and mind cast off, that is already the complete expression of Buddha nature. Nothing lacking, nothing extra, nothing to be added or subtracted." Rujing set down his teacup and looked directly at Dogen. "You have understood, but understanding is not enough. This must be lived, embodied, expressed moment by moment for the rest of your life. The casting off must continue, not as something you did once, but as the very substance of each moment." "Yes, Master. When you return to Japan, and you must return, to bring this teaching to your people. Remember this, Shinjin Datsuraku is not a special state to be achieved in extraordinary moments. It is the essence of each ordinary moment, each simple action. Walking, sitting, eating, sleeping, when done with body and mind cast off, all of it is the Buddha way. Dogen remained at Mount Tiantong for 2 more years, deepening his understanding under Rujing's guidance. The relationship between them was profoundly intimate, not sentimental or emotional, but the direct mind-to-mind transmission that Zen prized above all else. Rujing eventually gave Dogen formal recognition as an enlightened teacher, certifying him as a Dharma heir in the Caodong lineage of Zen. But for Dogen, this certification was almost irrelevant. What mattered was the living reality of Shinjin Datsuraku, the continuous casting off of body and mind in each moment of practice. When it was time to leave, Dogen stood before Rujing for the last time. The old master was now in his 70s, and both knew they would not meet again in this lifetime. "What will you do when you return to Japan?" Rujing asked. "I will teach Shinjin Datsuraku," Dogen replied. "I will show people that practice and enlightenment are not 2 separate things, that they don't need to seek Buddha nature somewhere else. It's right here in the simple act of sitting, breathing, being present with body and mind cast off." Rujing smiled. "Remember, not 1 speck of dust enters the eye. You haven't brought anything back from China that wasn't already in Japan. You're simply returning home to express what was always there." "Yes, Master. Empty-handed I came, empty-handed I return." And so Dogen returned to Japan, but he was no longer the same person who had left 4 years earlier. Or more accurately, there was no longer a person in the same sense. The body-mind that had once grasped at enlightenment as a future attainment had been cast off, revealing the timeless presence that had always been there. Back in Japan, Dogen established a monastery where he taught what he had learned. He called his approach just sitting, shikantaza in Japanese, the practice of sitting meditation with no object, no goal, no gaining idea, just the complete presence of body and mind in upright posture, moment after moment. To those who came seeking enlightenment, he would say, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be verified by all things. To be verified by all things is to cast off body and mind of both self and others." This was not mere philosophy to Dogen. It was the lived reality of his every moment. In sitting, in walking, in eating, in teaching, all of it was the continuous casting off of body and mind, the continuous manifestation of Buddha nature expressing itself as ordinary activity. Students would ask him, "Master Dogen, you speak of casting off body and mind. Does this mean we should hate or reject the body and mind?" "No," he would reply. "Casting off is not rejection, it's releasing the tight grip of identification. Body and mind continue, breathing happens, thoughts arise, but they're no longer clung to as me or mine. They're seen as temporary formations arising in the vast space of awareness, like clouds passing through the sky." "But how do we cast off body and mind?" they would ask. "What technique should we use?" Dogen's answer was always the same. Just sit. Sit in zazen with no purpose, no gaining idea, no goal of becoming enlightened. In that purposeless sitting, body and mind naturally fall away. You don't make it happen. It happens when you stop trying to make anything happen. One day, a scholar visited Dogen and challenged him. "Master, you say that practice and enlightenment are one, but this contradicts logic. If we are already enlightened, practice is unnecessary. If we are not enlightened, practice cannot make us so. Which is it?" Dogen looked at him with the same penetrating clarity he had learned from Rujing. "Your question assumes that there is someone who is either enlightened or not enlightened. But when body and mind are cast off, where is this someone? Practice does not make an unenlightened person into an enlightened one. Practice is the manifestation of enlightenment itself, Buddha nature expressing itself as practice." The scholar frowned, trying to grasp this intellectually. Dogen continued, "Right now, are you breathing?" "Yes, of course." "Are you trying to breathe?" Are you doing breathing as a technique to achieve some goal? No, breathing just happens. Exactly. True Zazen is like that. When body and mind are cast off, sitting just happens. Not someone sitting to achieve something, but sitting itself, complete in itself, lacking nothing, needing nothing added. That is practice enlightenment. Years passed, and Dogen's reputation grew. His monastery attracted sincere students, and his writings articulated the Zen path with unprecedented clarity and depth. But he never strayed from the essential teaching he had received in that dark meditation hall in China, when Rujing's shout had shattered his seeking and revealed the timeless presence that had been there all along. In his later years, Dogen would sometimes sit alone in the meditation hall in the hours before dawn, just as he had done in China. The darkness, the silence, the simple upright posture, nothing special, nothing extra, just body and mind cast off, revealing the ordinary miracle of existence itself. On one such morning, shortly before his death at the age of 53, Dogen sat in the darkness and smiled. The young monk who had crossed the sea to China, seeking enlightenment, seemed like a dream character from another lifetime. That seeking, that striving, that fundamental assumption that there was someone who needed to attain something, all of it had been cast off in a single moment 30 years ago. But the casting off had never stopped. Each moment was a new opportunity to release the grip, to let body and mind fall away, to rest in the vast presence that needed nothing, lacked nothing, was already complete. As the first gray light of dawn began to filter into the hall, Dogen heard the morning birds begin their song. Just this, he thought, always just this. Body and mind cast off, revealing what had been here before the first thought arose and would remain after the last thought faded. The unborn, undying presence that was everyone's true nature. The bell rang for morning service. Dogen stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, his body now weakened by illness, but his presence as clear as ever. He walked out of the meditation hall to greet the day, to meet whatever came with body and mind cast off, with nothing to defend, nothing to attain, nothing to lose. Just this simple walking, this breathing, this being present, complete in itself, lacking nothing, needing no improvement or addition. The teaching that Rujing's shout had awakened in him so many years ago, still fresh, still alive, still expressing itself in each ordinary moment. Shinjin Datsuraku, body and mind cast off. This was Dogen's teaching, his life, his gift to all who would hear it. Not a method to become something better, but an invitation to release the burden of trying to be anything at all, and rest in the vast, peaceful presence that had been here all along. And so our journey through these ancient Zen teachings comes to a peaceful close. From the tea master who found perfection in a broken bowl, to the monk who discovered fearlessness facing death, to Dogen's profound realization that we need not become what we already are. Each story has invited us to release our grip on worry, striving, and the need to be different than we are right now. These teachers from centuries past offer us the same timeless wisdom. Peace is not something to achieve tomorrow, but something to recognize in this very moment when we stop struggling and simply allow ourselves to be. As you drift towards sleep, let these teachings settle gently in your heart. There is nothing you need to fix, nothing you need to become. Just like the tea bowl made beautiful by its cracks, you are already complete. Just like Bankei'S unborn mind, your peace has been here all along, waiting beneath the stories you tell yourself. Rest now in this understanding. Let body and mind be cast off. Let sleep come naturally, like a flower opening to moonlight. May you wake refreshed, carrying this peace into your day. Good night.